Most people are able to separate movies from reality, but sometimes they serve as terrifying inspirations for poisonings, murder sprees, and other violent fantasies. On March 30th, 1981, John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan in a misguided attempt to win the affection of Jodie Foster, after he saw her in the 1976 film Taxi Driver. The movie actually drew upon a real-life assassination plot that was itself inspired by another movie, as Arthur Bremer shot and paralyzed Alabama Governor George Wallace after seeing A Clockwork Orange. Taxi Driver stars Robert De Niro as Travis Bickle, an unbalanced New York cab driver who attempts to rescue an underage sex worker played by Foster in a blood-soaked shootout. Hinckley reportedly watched the movie at least 15 times and eventually began to dress and act like Bickle. He also became obsessed with Foster and believed that shooting the president would draw them together. Hinckley fired 6 shots at Reagan, injuring 2 members of the president's entourage as well as a police officer. Only 1 bullet hit its intended target, narrowly missing Reagan's heart after ricocheting off his limo. He required lung surgery but quickly recovered. A subsequent trial deemed Hinckley not guilty by reason of insanity. He was released in 2022 and has since pursued a career as a musician. Ghostface from Scream is an iconic fictional villain who has inspired multiple real-life horrors. In 2006, 16-year-olds Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk were convicted of first-degree murder after stabbing their classmate Cassie Jo Stoddart. Draper and Adamczyk initially told police that they only intended to scare Stoddart, but that the prank got out of hand. However, the discovery of a hidden videotape showed the 2 of them planning the crime in disturbing detail.
We're sick psychopaths that get pleasure of killing other people. It'd be just like Scream.
Draper and Adamczyk are now serving life sentences without parole. 5 years earlier, Belgian truck driver Terry Gerardin donned Ghostface garb to kill his 15-year-old neighbor, Alison Combier, in his home. When Combier rejected Gerardin's sexual advances, he dressed as Ghostface before stabbing her 30 times. He then placed her body on his bed with a rose in her hand and called her father to confess to the killing. Gerardin was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In 2004, British citizens were shocked by a killing spree carried out by a man named Daniel Gonzalez, who killed 4 people and injured 2 others. When he confessed to the police, he claimed that he wanted to find out what it would be like to be Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, a long history of mental illness may have been the real motivation. Gonzalez reportedly struggled with both substance abuse and schizophrenia. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, though the jury rejected that defense and handed down 6 life sentences.
In the end, they took barely 50 minutes, certainly less than an hour, to come to their unanimous view that this was murder.
While in custody, Gonzalez attempted to kill himself by biting his arm. He died in 2007 after cutting his wrists with a broken CD case. His mother later told BBC News that repeated efforts to get medical attention for her son were disregarded. A 2009 report by the National Health Service concluded that human error and lack of resources contributed to the lack of urgency given to Gonzalez's case by mental health workers. In the 2005 rom-com Wedding Crashers, Owen Wilson's character Jeremy inserts eye drops into the drink of Bradley Cooper's sack, which results in some debilitating stomach issues. The scene is played for laughs, but the reality is much, much worse. Most brands of eye drops for reducing redness contain a chemical called tetrahydrozoline, which if ingested can lead to decreased breathing, a slow heartbeat, and even coma. In 2009, sheriffs in Rowan County, North Carolina arrested Jamie Cruz after her fiancé reported that he saw her put eye drops in his beverage. He then locked himself in the bathroom along with their daughter and called 911. Cruz initially denied the accusation, but later admitted that she was trying to sicken her fiancé in order to escape with their daughter, and that she got the idea after watching Wedding Crashers. Convicted Australian killer Martin Bryant was a big fan of Chucky from the Child's Play movies. He frequently spoke about the killer doll before he committed the deadliest mass murder in his country's history. As a former girlfriend of his recalled, he was particularly fond of repeating one line from Child's Play 3.
Don't with the Chuck!
Bryant reportedly struggled with violent impulses and an intellectual disability. On April 28, 1996, he used semi-automatic rifles to kill 35 people in the Tasmanian town of Port Arthur. He was captured by police the following day and given 35 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The aftermath prompted the Australian government to restrict private ownership of high-powered guns. The notorious 2004 horror film Saw inspired 2 very different real-life schemes. The first case involved a message left on the phone of Tennessee resident Beverly Dixon in 2007. It claimed that a friend of Dixon's was trapped inside her house, which would fill with toxic gas unless she freed her with a key. Dixon suffered a stroke after hearing the message. Police traced it to 2 13-year-old girls who spent the previous night making prank calls. Both of them were charged with phone harassment. The other case, which occurred in 2009, involved a pair of teenage boys in Salt Lake City who planned to kidnap and then record the torture and murder of 2 female middle school students and a school police officer. The mother of one of the boys overheard their plans and contacted police. According to court documents, the boys confirmed to a detective that their plan was inspired by Saw and that they were targeting people who had harmed others. 19-year-old Indianapolis resident Jonathan Cruz received 3 consecutive life sentences following a 4-day rampage in 2016 that he claimed was inspired by The Purge, a 2013 movie about a nationally sanctioned day of lawlessness. Cruz was charged with 17 counts in total, including 3 for murder and 2 for robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. Police found a text message on Cruz's phone that read, "I purge every night now. Since I'm dying, someone else has to." Cruz pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, Elijah Brooks, who stole the car that was used during the spree, was sentenced to 20 years. Another co-conspirator, Stephen Clark, was sentenced to 16 years for his part in one of the robberies.
The killings which have occurred here are beyond senseless.
On February 22, 1980, police in Wichita Falls, Texas, received a phone call from a babysitter who claimed that the 4-year-old girl she had been hired to watch was dead. The girl, Conji Wilson, was found in a car with 7 stab wounds. Her heart had been removed and was discovered in the car wrapped in a washcloth. Police searched the home of her mother, Patricia Frazier, and found a blood-soaked mattress and the knife used in the murder. Frazier had a history of mental illness, and she told psychologist Dr. Leon Morris that she killed her daughter because she believed she was possessed by demons. He later testified that Frazier's actions were inspired in part by watching The Exorcist. When the case went to trial, Frazier's defense sought to declare their client innocent by reason of insanity. The jury was unable to reach a verdict, but a second trial in 1981 resulted in Frazier's acquittal due to her mental status. She was ultimately remanded into the custody of her mother. A Western Massachusetts community was rocked in 1988 by a murder seemingly inspired by Jason Voorhees, the masked killer in the Friday the 13th franchise. 19-year-old Mark Branch was the prime suspect in the brutal slaying of 18-year-old Sharon Gregory, who was found stabbed to death in her home in Greenfield on October 24th. Police focused on Branch after interviews with Gregory's friends and neighbors yielded a wealth of disturbing information about him, including an apparent obsession with horror movies. Branch was reportedly the subject of a profile written by Gregory, who was a freshman psychology major. According to Greenfield Police Chief David McCarthy, retrieving the report was part of Branch's motive, but so was his need to live out his horror fantasy. As McCarthy claimed, he was so entrenched with Jason that he had to have the final chapter in his own feelings. He wanted to know what it felt like to live out the part of Jason. But by the time police intensified their search for Branch, he had disappeared. His car was found abandoned in a woodland area with traces of blood inside, but he was nowhere to be seen. Greenfield canceled its annual Halloween parade and asked parents to keep kids indoors after sundown. In November, Branch's body was found hanging in a wooded area. His death was ruled a suicide.
According to the coroner, the body was there since day one, probably the same day that he killed the girl.
In 1995, 2 Oklahoma teenagers went on a cross-state killing spree after watching the 1994 crime film Natural Born Killers. Sarah Edmondson and Benjamin Darris spent the evening of March 5th at Edmondson's family's cabin, taking LSD and watching the movie several times. On March 7th, they made it to Hernando, Mississippi, where Darris shot and killed cotton mill manager William Savage. They then traveled to Ponchatoula, Louisiana, where Edmondson shot convenience store clerk Patsy Byers, leaving her paralyzed. Edmondson and Darris were arrested in early June after returning to Oklahoma. Edmondson told authorities that she was afraid of Darris and that he was obsessed with recreating the murders in Natural Born Killers. She was charged with second-degree murder and armed robbery and served 11 years of a 30-year sentence, getting released on parole in 2010. Darris, meanwhile, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. A 2002 lawsuit by Byers alleged that Warner Brothers director Oliver Stone and other production entities were guilty of inciting violence, though that case was ultimately dismissed. In 1995, Saskatoon teenager Sandy Charles killed 7-year-old Jonathan Timpson after becoming obsessed with the 1989 horror fantasy film Warlock, in which a witch hunter tries to stop a son of Satan from destroying the world. In the movie, someone who drinks the boiled fat of a virgin will be able to fly. Charles and an 8-year-old accomplice lured Timpson into a remote area in the lakeside community of L'Orange, where he was stabbed and bludgeoned to death. Charles then reportedly removed flesh from Timpson's body and cooked it, although he didn't consume any of it.
That individual didn't have a chance to develop the mechanisms to repress his drives.
Charles was ultimately not found criminally responsible. Instead of prison, he spent his life in psychiatric facilities ever since. The crime shocked Canada to its core and led to nationwide calls for violence in films and TV to be reined in. The Collector is an Oscar-nominated thriller released in 1965 that stars Terrence Stamp as a loner who kidnaps a young woman to make her fall in love with him. It was a favorite of Robert Burdella, who earned the nickname the Butcher of Kansas City after kidnapping, torturing, and killing several young men, whose bodies he later dismembered. Arrested in 1988, Burdella told prosecutors that the seed for his crimes was planted after he saw The Collector. He was given life in prison with no chance of parole. He died of a heart attack in 1992. The novel that The Collector was based on also inspired Leonard Lake, who carried out a string of kidnappings, sexual assaults, and murders in California in the 1980s. He and his accomplice, Charles Ng, routinely videotaped their victims in a secret bunker in a cabin before killing them. Lake kept a journal in which he referred to his actions as Operation Miranda, the name of The Collector's female protagonist. Lake killed himself with a cyanide capsule after his arrest, while Ng is on death row in California. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.